Have you been feeling that unsettling sense of disconnect with your partner lately? That nagging feeling in your gut that something fundamental has shifted between you, even though you can't quite put your finger on it. You're not imagining things. Relationship experts have identified specific psychological patterns that emerge when a partnership is approaching its natural conclusion. Patterns that most people miss until it's too late. Today, I'm going to walk you through 6 research-backed signs that your relationship may be heading toward its end, with special attention to the 4th sign, which is often the most glaring red flag that both partners somehow overlook. Understanding these signals isn't about creating anxiety. It's about developing emotional awareness that can either help you address issues before they become terminal or prepare yourself emotionally for necessary transitions. The first sign is what psychologists call emotional withdrawal. This isn't just about having a few quiet days or needing some space. It's a persistent pattern where one or both partners begin to build psychological walls. Think about your recent interactions. Have conversations that once flowed naturally become stilted and superficial? Do you find yourself carefully editing what you share, holding back thoughts and feelings that previously would have been automatic to express? Research from the Gottman Institute shows that emotional withdrawal is often the first stage of relationship dissolution, appearing months or even years before more obvious problems emerge. What makes emotional withdrawal particularly insidious is how subtle it can be. It rarely happens as a conscious decision. More commonly, it creeps in gradually as disappointments accumulate and vulnerability feels increasingly unsafe. You might notice you're sharing good news with friends before your partner, or finding reasons to delay coming home in the evening. Your partner might be physically present, but emotionally elsewhere, responding with minimal engagement when you attempt meaningful conversation. These micro-disconnections accumulate over time, creating an emotional chasm that becomes increasingly difficult to bridge. The second sign involves your shared vision of the future gradually diverging. In healthy relationships, couples regularly engage in what psychologists call collaborative future thinking. They naturally include each other in their mental imagery of what's ahead. When a relationship is deteriorating, this collaborative future thinking begins to fade. Pay attention to how you think about major upcoming life events or decisions. Do you automatically imagine your current partner being part of them? Or have you begun to envision these scenarios with a conspicuous absence where your partner would normally be? This shift often appears in language first. The pronouns we and our gradually transform into I and my when discussing future plans. You might notice yourself making independent decisions that previously would have been joint considerations. Your partner might start pursuing individual goals without the natural inclination to factor your shared life into those pursuits. These aren't necessarily selfish acts. They're psychological indicators that the relationship no longer feels like a stable foundation for future building. The third sign reveals itself through changing conflict patterns. Every relationship experiences disagreements, but how those conflicts unfold says everything about the partnership's health. In relationships approaching their end, conflict typically transforms in one of 2 ways, either escalating to toxic levels of criticism and contempt, or perhaps more tellingly, fading into complete conflict avoidance. The latter might seem peaceful on the surface, but it actually signals something deeply troubling, that one or both partners no longer believe the relationship is worth the emotional investment of productive disagreement. Think about your recent disagreements. Do you find yourself choosing silence over expression because, what's the point? Has your partner stopped pushing back on things that once would have sparked intense discussion? This conflict avoidance creates a psychological phenomenon called emotional freezing, where genuine feelings go unexpressed and unaddressed, creating a false peace that masks the relationship's deterioration. Your emotional immune system essentially stops fighting to maintain health because on some level, it's recognized the relationship is already terminal. Now, the 4th sign, and the one most people later report as having been glaringly obvious in retrospect. Physical intimacy doesn't just decrease, it transforms. This isn't simply about the frequency of sexual connection, which naturally fluctuates in any long-term relationship. Rather, it's about a fundamental change in the quality and meaning of physical touch. Research consistently shows that couples approaching separation experience a distinct shift where physical contact begins to feel mechanical, obligatory, or increasingly uncomfortable. The psychological safety that once made vulnerability and physical closeness natural is eroded. What makes this sign particularly revealing is that it bypasses our cognitive defenses. Our bodies often recognize relationship disconnection before our minds are ready to acknowledge it. You might notice yourself flinching slightly at your partner's touch, or feeling a sense of relief rather than disappointment when intimacy is postponed. Your partner might maintain physical routines while their emotional presence in those moments noticeably withdraws. These physical manifestations of disconnect are often the most honest indicators of relationship health, which is why, in retrospect, people identify this sign as having been the most obvious. Their bodies knew the truth before their minds were ready to accept it. The fifth sign appears in your social connections, a growing disinterest in each other's relational worlds. Healthy couples naturally maintain curiosity about the important people in each other's lives. As a relationship deteriorates, this curiosity fades, replaced by indifference or even relief at not having to engage with your partner's social connections. You might notice yourself making fewer efforts to maintain relationships with your partner's friends or family. Your partner might stop asking about your close friendships or show decreasing willingness to participate in social events that matter to you. This social distancing serves an important psychological function when relationships are approaching their end. Subconsciously, we begin the process of disentangling our social worlds to minimize the disruption of an eventual separation. This isn't calculated or malicious. It's a self-protective mechanism that begins operating before we consciously acknowledge the relationship's fragility. The shared social ecosystem that once reinforced your connection gradually separates into distinct territories, creating less social resistance to an eventual parting. The sixth sign manifests in what therapists call your emotional economy, how you invest and distribute your emotional resources. In vibrant relationships, partners naturally channel significant emotional energy toward each other and their shared life. When a relationship is ending, a noticeable reallocation occurs. You might find yourself investing more emotionally in friendships, work projects, hobbies, or other interests that exist independently from your relationship. Your partner might develop sudden passion for activities that require substantial time away from your shared life. This redistribution of emotional resources isn't necessarily about finding replacement connections, though that can be part of it. More fundamentally, it's about the psychological system preparing for a future where this primary relationship no longer serves as the central emotional home. You're unconsciously building emotional support structures that don't depend on the partnership. While having independent interests is healthy in any relationship, the timing and intensity of this shift is what makes it significant as an indicator of relationship decline. What's most important to understand about these 6 signs is that none of them alone definitively predicts a relationship's end. Human connections are remarkably complex and resilient when both partners are willing to address difficulties directly. The crucial question isn't whether you recognize some of these patterns in your relationship. Many couples experience them temporarily during challenging periods. The more important consideration is whether these patterns have become the dominant experience of your relationship, and whether both partners are willing to acknowledge and address them. If you've recognized several of these signs in your relationship, consider this an opportunity for clarity rather than a reason for despair. Sometimes, identifying these patterns creates the necessary awareness for transformative conversations and renewed commitment. In other cases, these realizations help people accept that a relationship has run its natural course, allowing for more conscious, compassionate transitions rather than prolonged, painful deterioration. Remember that relationship endings, while painful, aren't inherently failures. Many relationships serve important purposes in our lives for particular seasons, offering growth, companionship, and learning before we move toward different chapters. The psychological courage to recognize when a relationship is approaching its conclusion, and to address that reality with honesty and compassion, is ultimately an act of respect for both yourself and your partner. Whatever patterns you're experiencing in your relationship, approach them with curiosity rather than judgment. The emotional intelligence to recognize relationship transitions is one of the most valuable psychological skills we can develop, allowing us to engage with our intimate connections honestly, responsibly, and with genuine care for both our own well-being and that of those we've chosen to share our lives with, even if only for a time. If you like my program, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a comment. See you next time.